As a restaurant host, I found myself in the midst of chaos on Father's Day, the busiest day of the year. I had an early start, waking up at 10 a.m. and clocking in at 12 p.m., ready to tackle the demanding day ahead. At around 3 p.m., I seated a seemingly ordinary family without giving it much thought. Little did I know this encounter would soon become quite memorable, albeit for all the wrong reasons. Approximately half an hour later, a cascade of complaints began pouring in. It turned out that the customers were attempting to make substitutions with their combo meals despite our strict policy allowing substitutions only for certain items. To my surprise, this wasn't just any run-of-the-mill combo meal. It amounted to a staggering $100 or more. The customer persistently tried to swap out expensive items for the more affordable ones, creating a frustrating situation for both the staff and me. Later on, when the restaurant finally had a lull in activity, the manager took a moment to rest and approached the front desk for a brief chat. She vented her frustration about these particular customers, outlining a series of grievances. 1. The customers pretended that they hadn't received a portion of their combo, despite multiple staff members, including the busboy, chefs, and waitress, confirming that it had been prepared and delivered to their table. 2. They resorted to holding the check and tip hostage, using it as leverage to coerce the staff into fixing their order. 3. Astonishingly, they returned over $40 worth of food after taking a single bite, claiming they were too full to continue. Initially, I didn't pay much attention to these complaints, brushing them off as merely an intriguing story that didn't directly affect me. However, it left a bitter taste in my mouth, tarnishing my overall impression of the encounter. Once the customers had completed their dining experience, they handed over their checks along with 2 coupons. Our company had stringent policies regarding the usage of coupons, specifically to prevent customers from splitting their orders and attempting to apply a coupon to each one. I diligently applied the $5 discount coupon as per the guidelines, printed the receipt, and handed it back to the waitress. However, she returned, exasperated, explaining that the customer was complaining about the second coupon not being utilized, despite the clear instructions stating only 1 coupon per table. Feeling tired and irritable after a mere 4 hours of sleep, I reluctantly deducted the cost of the hush puppies they had ordered and sent the revised receipt back. The customers paid their bills, swiped their cards, and left, or so I thought. If only it were that simple. A few minutes later, an elderly woman stormed back to the front of the restaurant, dragging the poor waitress along, demanding to know why the second coupon hadn't deducted $10 from their bill, but only $5.15. However, the coupon itself was technically invalid because we didn't have any entrees priced below $10, and nowhere did it state that it would provide a $10 discount. I tried explaining to the woman that she hadn't ordered any entrees below $10, so I had only deducted the cost of the hush puppies, she insisted, but it says $10 here. Failing to grasp her point, I responded with a dismissive and her frustration grew, and she snapped, so I should get $10 off. The situation escalated as she waved her hands in front of my face, brandishing the coupon with her nails, underlining the $10 value. She emphasized $10. Entree. Hush puppies aren't entrees. This back and forth continued a few more times, with our voices gradually becoming louder until she resorted to the ultimatum of demanding a refund. Exhausted and feeling overwhelmed, I decided to give in and offer her the $10 discount. I rationalized that if things turned out for the worst, I would cover the cost out of my own pocket. There were other customers waiting behind her, and I wanted to bring this ordeal to an end as swiftly as possible. Just as I relented and agreed to the discount, she seized the opportunity to taunt me, with her daughter recording the interaction as backup. She flaunted her self-satisfied smile and exclaimed, "Hush puppies aren't an entree. They're appetizers. I should be getting $10 off my entree. Can you even read?" At that moment, I had various options to respond, even considering playing the race card, a thought that occurred to me belatedly. However, consumed by anger, I chose to engage in an argument. I must admit, some of the things I said belonged in a cringe-worthy fantasy novel. As I write this, I find myself cringing and feeling embarrassed by my own words. Here's an approximation of how the conversation unfolded. "Nay, you know what? No, I'm not giving you a discount. Obnoxious customer, OC. I want to see a manager. Me. Well, congratulations. You're speaking to the manager, a claim I made up on the spot, and the final answer is no. OC. You're obviously not the manager because I've already spoken to one. You shouldn't be working at the front desk with your attitude. Me. Good for you, but the final answer is still no. Our voices continued to escalate, and at that moment, the actual manager entered the scene, attempting to defuse the situation. However, the most comical twist occurred when the woman's daughter tried to gaslight me and directly lied to the manager, likely to capture footage for her TikTok or some other social media platform. We've been polite this whole time, but you've been standing here calling us stupid, she falsely claimed. Ironically, I found myself despising this girl even more than her presumed mother. She embodied the textbook definition of a gaslighter with her condescending side smirk and her knack for making others feel foolish when all they did was defend their point. She relentlessly supported her mother, attempting to claim some sort of moral high ground or issue threats. She even tried to turn the waitress against me by insinuating that she might not receive a tip because of my behavior, despite her having received a generous $5 bill after enduring an hour and a half of their complaints and modifications. Ultimately, the manager gave in to their demands, granting them the discount. They left the restaurant content and without any consequences for their behavior. In hindsight, I realize I should have maintained my composure better. Now, there's a video of me circulating somewhere, depicting me acting like an unpleasant person, and I gained nothing from the ordeal. I felt an overwhelming sense of frustration toward the manager, but now I understand that she was simply caught in a difficult situation. People must cease treating those who work in the food industry as if they were slaves. After moving back from across the country, my 3 kids and I were either taking the bus or paying for rides from family and friends. My sister had a 15-ish-year-old full-size van that she offered to me for $500. I jumped on this offer as I was working the late shift, and I wouldn't need to bother anyone for a ride 8 miles both ways. After getting the van legal and insured, I was able to drive it for 3 to 4 months. Then, the front end axle breaks while I'm driving it. I was back to square one because getting it fixed would cost around $3,000, $4,000, and I was living paycheck to paycheck. Since I lived in an apartment complex, I had to get it off the property within 30 days. I ended up calling a friend who scraps the van and hauls it off. My sister is driving by as they are loading it. I was at work and got a phone call from the sheriff's department saying my sister is accusing me of stealing her van. After I get back to my apartment, I get the van title and go to the police station where my sis is waiting. I also called my friend who hauled off the van. The sheriff starts in on me and I just hand him the van title and the bill of sale. My friend then shows him the scrap sale papers and the VIN photo, which proves I'm in the clear. Needless to say, my dear sister was threatened with arrest for wasting police time and false accusations. I've been no contact with her for almost 6 years now, and no, I don't miss her drama one bit. The story happened about 15 years ago, give or take. At the time, I worked for a small industrial railroad in my city that served about 20 different industries along the docks. To get to the docks, from the yard, where I would pick up the inbound cars, deliveries to the industries, we had a mile of street trackage that ran right down the middle of a small street. Numerous bars lined the street on one side, with the river on the other side. Because of city regulations, we were only allowed to operate along that span of track between specific hours, typically 11 at night to about 5 in the morning. However, since the bars were open at that time, it also meant that we had to trundle along at a crawl, usually walking pace or just about that, and keep the locomotive on the front end of the movement. Every night I went down that street, there would typically be 2 or 3 people who had parked too close to the tracks, prompting me to have to get people to move their cars. It wasn't a major problem, just an annoyance. Except for one guy. It seemed that every single night I would have to stop about halfway down because this guy would always park his truck at an angle in the street as opposed to parallel parking. There were some angle parking spaces, but they were further down where there weren't rails in the road. Every single night I'd have to head into the bar this guy owned and bug the guy to get him to move the truck. Most of the time, It'd take him a good 30 minutes to an hour to drag himself out and move the damn thing. This meant, of course, I was losing time that I needed to get my job done. After months of this, I finally decided that I had enough. So, I decided to have the guy towed. Yeah, that didn't work out as well as I hoped. Turned out that the guy also had some job with the city or the mayor's office or some friend in either. So, no one would dare come out and tow his truck. I think I waited there a good hour before he eventually came out and moved it, even having the gall to flip me the bird as he left. At that point, I decided that not only was I totally done with the guy, but if the chance arose, I was going to teach him a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. Nothing physical per se, just a hard-learned lesson. Couple days later, I found myself heading down the track with half a dozen heavy cars with machinery bound for the docks. As I rounded the curve and neared the place where that guy always parked, I gently applied the independent brakes on the locomotive. This would slow the heavy train, but wasn't enough to stop it outright. At least, not quickly. I waited until the very last minute, laying on the horn and applying the full brakes, bringing everything to a screeching halt in the middle of the street. As I felt the brakes begin to hold, there was this loud thunk and screeching and tearing of metal as the train simply punted the truck out of the way, tearing the bed clean off it in the process. This did not go unnoticed, as a crowd had started to gather out front of the bar when they heard the train coming. I stayed in the cab, calling back to dispatch and informed them that I'd struck a parked car and they needed to get the police and a tow truck out to my location. All the while, I could hear this guy screaming, heard him over the sound of the locomotive no less, at the top of his lungs about how he was going to have me thrown in jail, sue the company, and all manner of things. Locking the doors, I opted to just wait in the cab for the boys in blue to arrive. Eventually, they pop around and start taking statements. I explained the problem, noting that I couldn't simply slam on the brakes due to the cargo I was carrying. Well, I could have, but it wouldn't have been a good idea. And that the only reason I hit the truck was because it was improperly parked. I added that the gentleman had been warned in the past that something like this could happen and had ignored the warnings. The man, for his part, was simply livid, hopping around, yelling at me, yelling at the cops, and just beside himself. In the end, he was ticketed for his bad parking, obstructing the passage of a train, and his truck was totaled, and he ended up on the hook for paying for it. Truck was brand new and not yet paid off, or so I was told. It took about 2 hours to clean up the mess, and I was, per company rules, suspended for a week during the company investigation. But honestly, it was worth it. Didn't have any problems with him from that point forward either. Long story short, I've been transferred to a team with bad statistics, bad workflow, attitude, bad everything. It came to the point that when I said to a colleague, please get back to work, there's a backlog, it blew into a fight how I'm a princess who thinks is better than the rest. I had troubles blending in with this team. I work, and I don't mind it. I hate nagging and complaining. Don't like your job. Okay, cool that you let me know, but you're here at your own wish. Besides, one time is enough. After a year and a half of arguments, attempts to tell HR how I ruined the team for making them work, I left my notice at my manager's desk. For the last 3 months of my notice, I've been working extremely hard, giving my 150%. Our higher-ups raised monthly targets 3 times already and will do it once again. But this time they will not achieve them. They have never achieved them before I came. Petty, very much. Do I care? No. For everything they've done to me, they deserve it. People aged 25, 40, acting like a bunch of lazy high school bullies.